All right, previously I had my paper taped down, but now I've untaped it so I can kind of pick it up and tilt it for this next. Plus I want to tilt it to show you something. Now my water was getting pretty dirty. It was pretty purple-ish, and I went and got some clear water, which you may want to do as well if your water gets pretty muddy. Because I'm going to put a clear coat of water over top of this, and I'll show you. I tilted in the light. I'll show you. You got to get it to just the right level of wetness before you start adding your gradient. So we're going to do what's called a wet and wet. You can also do this wet and dry. I'll show you two different ways, and you can experiment with both. But this, when I did these gradients over here, this was a wet on dry. I started on dry paper, did wet, pulled it down. Now the only problem with doing that over top of these is it depends on how dry these are. If you just dried them, you're going to end up doing wet on dry. You could end up kind of erasing some of your color here. If they've dried overnight, it might be more set into the paper. But we'll see what happens. I'm going to experiment with both. I'm going to do wet on wet and wet on dry. So the first one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to re-wet the entire area of this circle. And you can see because it hasn't dried very long, it is kind of pulling up some of the color a little bit. You just have to be careful that you don't scrub it and erase it too much. Okay, or if you start to get some of those streaks, okay, just kind of spread the paint around a little bit. You can see how it's moving. So I just kind of spread it around so that it sort of evens back out. Okay, and I'll tilt this. You can see it's got a sheen. You want it to have that sheen, but you don't want it to puddle up on you. And if your wash, I can see I missed a spot there. If your wash didn't come out too flat, this is also another opportunity to kind of, as you spread the paint around, it kind of can spread it out and kind of flatten it back out for you, like smoothing out all the wrinkles. All right, so I'm going to start with my purple now. I've got some purple, nice thick purple over here on my palette, and hopefully I don't stick my head in. I'm going to sit back down. I was kind of standing up. And I'm going to start over here on the side. I could start on the bottom, I could start on the top, but I think it's going to be easiest to start on the side. When you paint your insects, it's kind of hard to start on the bottom and kind of push the paint upward. It's easier to probably pull it downward, but I don't know if you're going to want your insect completely upside down. You're going to want to kind of see what you're doing. So I almost suggest when you have your insect is maybe having the bottom of the insect to your left if you're right-handed, and to your right if you're left-handed. But anyway, I'm going to take the paint and I'm just going to start to lay, and you can see how the paint just really starts to spread out. And I'm just going to kind of feather it out. Now I'm going to immediately start rinsing. And now it's important that you really kind of tap your brush on your towel and start getting rid of some of that excess water, because if I put too much water in here right now, it's going to push all that paint away, and I could get sort of that big blossom effect. Now I just started to spread out the paint. Now I kind of worked backwards, and I'm taking some of this paint that I already have, and I'm kind of redistributing it. And just kind of pulling around. You can see how it'll bleed and blend out, and I can get rid of some excess paint on my brush. And I'm not making heavy strokes. I'm just kind of lightly touching it to the surface as I was kind of spreading that out, right? And that will just continue to kind of dissipate like that and spread out. So if I come in here and do something, I got to make sure that my brush isn't too wet. If I get too much water on my brush, in fact, I'll show you. If I got too much water on my brush and I come in here, excuse me, and I start doing that, you can see how it spreads out and kind of ruins that. So you have to have, you know, your brush can't be too soaking wet. That's why oftentimes I tap it and I just touch it down on here. I don't want it so totally dry that when I go in here I'm kind of erasing everything like that either. Okay, unless you do want to erase something. So, and I can even take, if this is still wet, I can even take some of this red. I can kind of fix this even though I messed it up on purpose, and I can kind of work my way back. But notice I'm working from one end into the other. I'm kind of blending it. I'm not picking up this purple and putting it over here. I worked into the purple, and now I'm going to work my purple kind of back like this into the red area. And then just kind of lift up on my brush and just barely touch it down so that it has like just kind of a minor impact like that. And that's how you get, one way to get your gradient anyway. All right, this one I'm going to try wet on dry. Now what I'm going to do is, let's see if I have enough of my paint. I think I have enough of my paint. I'm going to make like a darker version of this paint. I'm going to take some green and I'm going to mix it in. Well, let's grab a little bit more red. And a little bit more orange. My base color was a mixture of orange and red. And so I mixed green now because green is the opposite of red. It was kind of reddish. I could have done like a blue-green if I wanted. So I'm just going to make like a darker version of the color. Kind of looks brownish. You know, I could throw a little more blue in there, but it's close enough. Although that's not really thick, actually. It's not thick enough. So what I really need to do is take some red, nice thick red, put that here. And take some green, mix that in there. I'm almost kind of making a gray because they're opposites, and that's what you're going to get. Maybe I'll just throw some thick orange into it to get some kind of color back into it. There we go. Okay. So I've got kind of a dark version of my color, and I'm going to go with that. This one I'm going to do wet on dry. Okay, so we'll see how it comes out. I'm not going to pre-wet my circle. I don't know if I got this paint really thick enough, but we'll make it work. Okay, let's rinse out my brush. Start fading that out, maybe fade it out a little bit more. Rinse some more. Dab on my towel. Okay, working my way across. Let's really start to fade this out now. Okay, I'm just going to kind of dry my brush. Now, cleaned it and dried it almost completely. And now, it's not lifting up too much of the paint, but what I'm going to do, excuse me, stupid COVID, is I'm going to continue this all the way across just so it blends out evenly and I don't end up with a watermark. Okay, and I'm going to kind of work back into that because I see I got a little bit of a spot there. Oop. And this is sort of dry a little bit, so I'm kind of making streak marks in there. I got a little bit of a streak right there. Let's start back here. Kind of work my way. I got to dry my brush. I think that's what I need to kind of lift a little bit right in there, just to lift a little bit of that color off. A little more moisture in here because I got to blend this out. So I just got my brush rinsed off, wet. It's got a little bit of moisture on it, just enough so I can move some paint around. Got this weird dark spot here where it didn't erase. Let's see. So doing it, pre-wetting it, because this paint didn't have enough time to dry, pre-wetting it is probably going to be the way to go. All right, I was able to kind of smooth it back out and kind of work my way across there. And then if I wanted to and come in and make this a little bit darker, I could grab some of this color again this dark color and sort of drop it in here and kind of reinforce that dark. And just add a little bit more darkness for a little bit more contrast there. Because it's already wet, so I can drop that paint in there. It's just gonna, flow a little bit just to increase that contrast there a little bit more. But so what I would do is, unless you're waiting till the next day, what I would do is do like I did the first version. I think you're going to be a little more successful. Wet everything, get it so it's got that sheen to it, just kind of like how this paper is now. If you look at it, it's got a sheen to it, but it's not really, puddled up. It's got a little puddle here where I just painted. But so you're going to do 4 of these. Do each one, a different color. If you're set on the color, you just want to practice the gradients. Practice that a couple more times. But another thing that I could do, I could even go a little bit darker if I wanted to just take this color, add some purple into it, and get another, darker, very dark version of that color. It's got a little bit of purple in it, but it's not quite brown. This almost kind of looks brown. But there's just different ways. If you mix complements, or if you mix contrasting colors from opposite side of the color wheel, it's going to gray that color down. But remember, to get these gradients, you got to start dark. So you got to start with some paint that's pretty thick, like I had here.